Okay, here we are in 1506. These are 5-year turns. I didn't bother explaining that before. Same scale as EU for the time span, but a lot more detail here in the colonization aspects. What do we have? Well, rolled up all the random events and had some interesting thoughts there. Basically, collection of cash, collection of your colonists. Now, one of the random events was kind of interesting. I think this is different. I'm not going to look it up because I want to go with these rules for the most part, just because I don't have a copy of the others in hard copy. The French only got 2 colonists, which meant they got a pile of money. But then they got the supply of colonists change thing. Now, both the thought of 2 colonists and then the possibility of 0 brings to mind, hey, when you've got one of these big fleets, like 4 big ships, that you could carry as many colonists as you can get, it's sort of like a bad economic period when your colonists dry up. Sure, you can start a new colony, you can send lots of troops, you can do things with that, but it does kind of change the focus of what you were planning on doing. What I'm planning on doing is continuing to pump resources into the Atlantic coast, build that up, and then expand out and do sort of what the English did historically, although a lot earlier. And the Spanish for that matter too, but the Spanish have the gold and everything to go for. Also got, the Spanish got a costly European war, which basically kept their income about where it is. They're at like 60 bucks now, or 60 ducats. They've got a problem. They may decommission stuff at the end of the turn or something. And they have a fairly large fleet, again the 4 ships. Some colonists, they're not going to be able to afford to build a lot more troops, etc. They just really need to establish this and start pumping that gold out for themselves, and also from the Caribbean. Portugal, both England and Portugal got this event. It's event 10 here. Natives resentful of European intrusion. If you have a small colony, now small colonies are usually safe, right? Because they're not going to generate a native uprising as easily. You add the colonists to the native level, and the Portuguese here in Panama and in Rio de Plata, low number of natives, fairly decent chance that they can avoid an uprising on a given turn. It'll happen eventually. Well, what this does is it picks out one of those little ones, a 1 or 2 point colony, and wipes it out. And what they ended up losing was the one in the largest native level, Brazil. That's just gone. The troops stay. The colonists are gone. Again, this can be a very rough game, which is one of the reasons I came to the conclusion at one point, it may be best not to build ships and not to send colonists over and stuff. Just sort of don't play. The problem is there is some advantage to be gained from some of the exploration. And once you start doing the exploration, well, as we saw with the Brits, dropping off a colonist here doesn't really cost you anything. If you got to send a ship somewhere, you might as well drop that off. Yeah, you may be spending money later, but it's pretty minor. Of course, the chance of you surviving something like that without supporting it is pretty much nil as well. So it would be a waste of your of the money that you're spending on maintenance if you don't support it at all. But usually you have a reason to support it. Okay, so taking a little break here. Well, I noticed something screwy, which is the English can't do anything. They have no explorer. Now, somebody could sell them one or rent them one. They had a lot of colonists. I'm also noticing they don't get another explorer until way up here, which means they'll be paying 1, 2, 3 bucks to maintain ships that cost them only 4 to keep. May not be the best ones. They should have deleted these last turn. At this point, those ships actually are worth keeping because they're only going to pay 3 bucks for them and it would cost 4 to build. So they will keep them online. But they're not going to be able to deliver their colonists because they have nowhere to go. And nobody's going to rent them an explorer. Portugal has a use for its. Spain has a use for its. They each only have 1. Well, Portugal actually has 2. But they just have no interest in giving the English a chance, and the English don't have an interest in paying more to land. They're kind of taking the, all right, we don't have anything, we won't have anything for a while. That's fine. By the time we hit up here with Cabot, well, the next turn is a double production turn, which means that your colonies actually do start producing money and they become more valuable. What the French are doing is breaking even, but solidifying themselves in a way that the English really didn't. This is the period of the game where generally the gold is the worthwhile thing. But I think what the French are doing is worthwhile. As long as you can break even and build up an empire, that's fine. But that's not what I wanted to talk about. What I wanted to talk about was the record keeping. Rocking Horse Dream made a comment that he tried to play this solo, and doing multiplayer really sucked with all the record keeping. And then the solo game's really good, but kind of long. And the solo game's interesting, but to do the multiplayer solo, I'm going to show you what I do to cheat. In order to avoid writing down all these things, what I do is I run the money, I just, you know, as I buy things, I mark them down here on my calculator. I mark where I'm going by putting the ship there. It's a solitaire game. I'm going to know where things are going anyway. I've got it written down. It's going to be in my head. So, you know, I'm going to be making these decisions and these conflicts to deal with anyway. It's not like playing it opposed. And then I buy all remaining bounds. These are going to be both hemispheric as well as the return value. And I just put them on a number marker to indicate that the ship's going to come back. You know, it has that much movement left. I actually think that's more reasonable, and I played that way, I think, in opposed games where, hey, if you have extra bounds to return with, you can use them in hemispheric movement and maybe save yourself from having to roll on that 9+ table. All right. Portugal is going to take another shot at the Capexes. They're reinforcing that very heavily. We'll see what happens. One thing you may have quickly noticed is that the numbers I had on these, 4 for this and 3 for this, didn't take into account the landing hemispheric costs. I paid those extra costs, rolled the attrition. Bad attrition, by the way. The colonists lost here, but the Spanish lost a ship. Now, they had a little ship they could lose, which is one reason to have those little ships, actually, because it's less expensive when you take the big attrition hit. I still haven't done the Portuguese. Well, the Portuguese actually lost a ship and didn't make it over again, but they didn't lose any of the stuff they were carrying. This is one thing you have to do. You have to retroactively look at what was on that ship and see if some of it would have been lost. In this case, that wasn't a problem because the Portuguese actually had low numbers of... they were bringing more ships than they needed, essentially. Knowing that they're going around this, they had already built up this huge fleet. They're actually kind of using it for this risky maneuver. They still didn't make it across, though, and they keep spending money on that. They don't have a lot left. They're not as bad off as Spain, but it's ugly for them. They're spreading out, you know, doing the land movement, native attacks and attrition. The French managed to wipe out the Atlantic coast natives. The Spaniards managed, I think, maybe there's one left. Yeah, there's still one left here. Alright. And they may have actually had a native problem and lost one. I know they lost someone. The Spanish did manage to wipe out the Aztecs, which means next turn they can begin looting Tenochtitlan. Of course, they're losing their Conquistador this turn. I'll take him off now because sometimes it's hard to remember them because they're on the board. The explorers are always back here, almost always. Bad news for the Portuguese. They lost a soldier and then colonist as well down here with attrition and all that. A lot is going on there. But mainly, you know, so I can avoid the paperwork side of things, but there's still the fiddliness of moving this track up and down for colonists. It would be kind of neat if you just kind of said, and I think I used to do this, you know, I'm not going to, colonists that don't make money or lose money, I'm not going to record at all. I'm just going to kind of tilt them or something to remind me. But there's also, you know, a lot of die rolling in this game. During the land phase, you roll for the native attack, you roll for a possible native uprising, you roll the effects of that native uprising, then each hex has to roll for attrition. There's a lot going on, and naval movement, you have to roll for attrition in each direction. Basically, if there were a lot of counters on the board, and there do get to be eventually a decent number, it becomes really, really painful. On the bright side, though, all that attrition and everything keeps the number of counters on the board lower in some ways. What you don't want to do, and I did here, usually, is spread out. You want to have your 5 colonists, which is your maximum that can produce in any one area, because in any one hex, in general, because that way you don't have to roll as many attrition table losses. You also kind of want to conglomerate your forces, so all your soldiers being in one hex is kind of cool. It means you're weaker. It means somebody can attack your port. So for example, if the English won an inn, they could go seize a port, and now they're on the board. They didn't need an explorer, and they didn't have to fight your big stack. But the negative to that is, on the land attrition table, if you have just colonists in a space, well, only a 1, 3, and 4 can possibly hurt you. And if you've got kind of low numbers, only a 1 can help you in terms of attrition, can hurt you. But if you add soldiers, well, then the 2 starts to hurt you. And you lose more stuff the more different types of stuff you have. So there's kind of weird feelings there where you want to keep your military all conglomerated in one place, which kind of makes sense. All right. We'll see if anything interesting happens there. Crap. I see I forgot to use some of my leaders. I just didn't assign them at the beginning of the turn. I don't know. Whatever, no big deal. The only person that's kind of a pain for is the Spaniards, who do want to explore northward and probably could have used a Conquistador there. But they could use them for something else too. Now, I wanted to explain my exception to that, so I'm continuing on doing other things. I've got the Spanish splitting 3 guys off here and 2 here, and the reason is because I've got a working gold mine here. You don't want colonists who are in the same space as a working gold mine produce nothing. The ones in the same area only produce 1 times no matter what. That 15 bucks is great and everything, but I still don't want to be cut off from the 3 that I can make from these guys. 2 guys there is going to survive in the gold mine. It does increase my risk of attrition a little bit, but it's okay. And as we hit the end of turn 3, and yeah, I mean to go into less detail on each turn, but I'm kind of having trouble. We see a real problem. Spain's down to 30 ducats. Now they have that big gold thing and they have this thing. They're going to have to start hauling their gold back, and that has to be their main goal. They can't be populating more troops. They don't have the money for an army right now. They're going to have to fund that later. Other countries, well, the Portuguese aren't doing too well either with 50, and they don't have a lot of prospects. They're kind of dead-ending themselves here. They've got gold here that they can try to discover and maybe try to pull out. And they've got this colony here that should not lose them too much money, but they're having struggles with it. They wanted to use this as a base to take the gold mines here in Brazil, but that's and also Cusco. That's proving to be not very effective for them right now. The French are healthy. They're losing money off this. There's no question there, and that's kind of the problem. They're establishing something that will eventually make money, but they're not hurt. They're in good cash position for that. The English, of course, not playing anymore, basically. At least not for a little while. All right, let's send this up.